Good evening, students. Today I am beginning and actually reiterating on a topic that I have previously covered, which is false promise to marry. Now, false promise to marry was previously dealt with under IPC under section 375, that is in context of rape. But when we look at it in BNS, it has been dealt separately under section 69. So, in case you want to have a look at the concept in depth and how it differs from rape, please look into that video of mine. And when we talk about the current topic, the current case that we are dealing with, the only angle that we are looking into is that the court is reiterating the fact that if there is a large duration of time for which the relationship has been um, has been in existence, then in such situations, the case of false promise to marry is a harder case to establish. So let us look into the incident that has taken place in this particular case, and then as and when we reach particular concepts, we'll have a further discussion of the same. So, looking into the facts of this particular case, this incident takes place, let us say, between A and B, A here being the male and B being the female. In the incident, A enters into the house of B, is it is alleged, on one night and forces intimacy onto this female. And this is in her own home when her parents are at home. Now, after this incident, of this particular female is very upset, and therefore she is in a very bad state, and the male promises to her that he will marry her subsequently. And it is alleged that this is one of the reasons why she continues in this kind of relationship with the individual. Now, this incident took place in 2006. It is said that she continues the relationship, and on many occasions she visits this individual, the individual visits her, and she also gets into a government job as a lecturer. This individual also joins in as a clerk in a bank, etc. So they keep progressing in life, maintain the relationship, and continue to meet each other. There are different incidents which are told by the complainant, which is the female, and the appellant, which is the accused in this particular case. The female keeps reiterating the fact that she based the relationship on the promise that was given of marriage on the initial incident. Continues the relationship. He is on a different location in a different village where she commutes to. Over the gap of 16 years, over a phase of 16 years, this relationship exists, and they both commute to each other's locations, are sexually intimate. And she even alleges that she has given some money to him, and so on and so forth. One occasion, it is found out on one occasion that the male has befriended another female named Namrata and subsequently gets married to her. Immediately after this marriage, the complaint is made by the female that there was sexual exploitation of her by the male, and that there was this allegation of false promise to marry on his behalf. So, in this background, now we will look into whether we can establish the offense of false promise to marry. Before we go further into that discussion, as I told you, under IPC, it is dealt with as a subset of section 375. Whereas in context of BNS, this has been dealt with under section 69. Now, why is this relevant? Because 375 does not really identify false promise to marry. It identifies a circumstance wherein if you commit the act of intercourse with a female without her consent, that will amount to rape. And a subset of that has been identified as false promise to marry under the ambit of misconception of fact, where she is under the misconception that he will marry her. That being false is used as an allegation of rape against the accused. So, in this case, this section 375 has been applied under this ambit. Now, coming to the incident, As I said, she has also alleged that he has taken some amount of money from her. He has recorded a video of her without her consent, and there are threats that have been given by him to her of publishing these videos, and that is why she has continued the relationship with him, is the allegation she has made. However, it has to be remembered that suddenly, post the marriage of the individual, she has decided to file the complaint. And in this regard, the Supreme Court has made its comments. The Supreme Court has highlighted the fact that the complainant in this particular case had one incident where she says, the initial incident where she was forced to be sexually intimate with the individual, but the court reiterates the fact that how can that happen in your own home and where your parents are present. So the court expresses doubt on this facet, that you are in your own home, your parents are present, however, still a forceful act of intimacy takes place with a girl who is now a professor. She is a qualified individual who was major at that time. So, raising questions onto this allegation was one aspect that the court highlighted. The second thing, the court said that they used to keep meeting one another. In 2009, another forced incident has been stated by the female, but the court said for 3 years you have been in a relationship. Why was the need for some kind of forceful incident to take place with you where an intoxicating substance was used against you? Why does this incident take place after such a long relation already being in place? So again, the Supreme Court uh, expresses their concern and doubts regarding the incident which was mentioned by the complainant, the female, right? The court further states that intimate relations which continued between the parties for so many years, and in such a situation, it sounds difficult that you had to still spike the drink of the female. And reiterating the fact that she was highly qualified, well placed, an adult female, in such situations, it's hard to believe that for a period of 16 years, she did not protest. And then suddenly, after there was this aspect of him getting married to another female, allegations were made, and the allegation was that there was a false promise to marriage. The court says the prolonged period of 16 years during which the sexual relations continued unabatedly between the parties is sufficient to conclude that there was never an element of force in the relationship. So the court is expressing its doubt on the allegation. This leads to the aspect, and this has been a discussion which is taking place, that is false promise to marry as an offense something which can be misguided in context of consensual live-in relationships? That's what the court is trying to highlight here, that this may be a situation where they were maybe in a live-in or in a long-term consensual relation, but because it has not fruited into marriage, that the female has filed a case. This is one aspect which the court is wanting to highlight in the situation. It has highlighted the case of Mahesh Damu versus State of Maharashtra, where it explains what is false promise to marry and says that when an accused is having a sexual relationship by false promise of marriage, the physical relationship must be traced directly to the false marriage, right? To the false promise that has been made for marriage. So it should show direct nexus between the false promise to marry and the acts of sexual intimacy which are there between the individuals. Now, where you cannot directly trace the intimacy to the false promise to marry, then the allegation can become weak. So, in such situations where there are long term relationships, like here 16 years is the duration, it is hard to say that the woman is solely being intimate on the grounds that there is a promise of marriage. There is also the aspect of that she is in love with the individual. So the idea that she's committing the act of intimacy solely on the basis of the promise to marriage is hard to establish, is hard to believe. There are other perspectives which may be included in context of the consent that she is giving to the act, right? It cannot be said that there was vitiation of consent under misconception of fact, where it was held that if it is assumed that a false promise of marriage was made to the complainant initially by the accused, the relationship continued for a period of 9 years, and that would render the plea of the complainant that her consent for all these years was under misconception of fact implausible. So, again, the court in this case reiterated that for such a long duration, the sole reason of intimacy cannot be a misconception of false promise to marry. There is a larger ambit which must be a part of her decision to concede to the intimacy. So it is hard to accept in the particular case they have used the word implausible to believe that this was a case of false promise of marriage, right? The other case which has been established or introduced here is the case of Prashant versus State, in which the court observed that it is inconceivable that the complainant would continue to meet an accused or maintain a prolonged association of physical relationship in the absence of consent. Again, going back to the duration of the relationship, if it is too long, it is hard to believe that there is an absence of volition or consent. It further states that no reasonable man would accept the version that the complainant was has allowed the accused to establish sexual relations for a period of 16 years purely under a misconception of marriage. So the allegation according to the court is hard to believe. It further says, on many occasions, she even portrayed herself to be the wife of the appellant. And therefore, it can be seen that there were situations where it may have been his intention to marry her. He may have genuinely wanted to marry her. But due to certain circumstances, it has not led to fulfillment. It has not led to the fruition of marriage because he met another woman or so on. Therefore, the court said, we are convinced that the relation between the complainant and the appellant was consensual without the existence of deceit or misconception, which is necessary for a false promise of marriage. Now, in this last half, it is important to distinguish between, which the court has done by referring to Deepak Gulati's case, that is between false promise to marry and breach of promise to marry. Now, what is a breach of promise to marry? That you had agreed, you had promised each other that you will marry, but unfortunately, due to certain circumstances, it does not happen. Now, this is a breach of promise. You want to get married, but unfortunately due to certain circumstances you are not able to get married. It is a breach of promise of marriage. A false promise of marriage, then what is, how does it differ from a breach? Is that from its inception it was something which was malified in nature and was done solely for the purpose of getting the female to be intimate with this individual. So it was false, it was deceitful, it was based on misconception. The consent, the agreement was based on something which he never from the start wanted to fulfill. That is a false relation. On the other hand, situations where you are not, for certain reasons, unable to fulfill a marriage or promise to marriage is known as a breach of promise to marry. So there is a difference of intention between the two. False promise of marriage requires you to have that malified intention to never, from the outset, have an intention to marry the individual. And the court said in this case, it is hard to establish that aspect, that he never wanted to marry her, especially bearing in mind that in fact she used to call herself or depict herself to be his wife. In such situations, it cannot be said that he never intended to marry her or from the outset was not going to marry her. It may be a case of breach, but it is not a case of false promise to marry, right? And so the court concludes with saying that the accused should not be made liable for the offense of rape in context of false promise to marry. She willfully agreed to maintain sexual relationships, and the court has also recognized that the prosecutrix can agree to have sexual intercourse on account of her love and passion for the accused. Apart from the aspect of the marriage, her own affection for the individual could have and may have, in such a long duration of time, led to the intimacy between the two individuals. Reiterating the fact, the court said the allegations of the complainant are full of material contradictions. She has contradicted herself on several places. The duration is too long, that is 16 years of the relationship, in which she kept quiet about the abused, and it was meted out by her against the appellant only after she learned that he married another female, right? So it doesn't really feel that there was abuse that she faced, but it was only done because her relationship didn't lead to marriage and he married another individual, right? So again, the court has reiterated and hinted on the fact that this is a case of a love affair or a relationship, live in relationship, which has gone sour, which has not gone the way the female wanted it to go, and therefore the allegation was posed against the accused. So, revising what we have just studied, Section 375 dealt with false promise to marry. It is under the ambit of circumstance where it is shown that the promise was under a misconception of fact by the woman. There was aspects of deceit involved where he never ever from the outset wanted to marry her. However, to this case, the court said it is not applicable because it was a long duration of 16 years for which she kept quiet, after which she only makes a complaint after she finds out that he marries another. Another aspect that has been borne in mind, that she was very well educated and was an adult throughout the relationship, and therefore must have deliberated and understood the magnanimity of the intimacy that she was holding, which could not only be restricted to a false aspect of the promise of marriage, but also that she had her own love and affection for the individual. For more details, as I said, an in-depth video of section 69 of BNS is also available on the YouTube channel. I thank you students for this, for listening to me. In case you have any doubts, please post them in the comment. And if you want me to pick up any particular topics or cases, do let me know in the comment section. Thank you.